Hello everyone, Jay here from Jade Productions, and today I'm going to be doing something a little bit differently. I'm going to be actually reviewing a RPG book that I've been heavily playing lately. Robotech, the role-playing game, the Macross Saga by SMG Games. My book recently arrived. I've been running sessions for about 2 months since the game came out, and I got the PDF you get when you order the book. Now, I know my channel is typically a Warhammer zone, and I love Warhammer, and the truth is, I do, and sure, this is not my regular content, but I really wanted to put this out there, because I really love this game, I really love this as an RPG. I'm an avid RPG player, from Dark Heresy to D&D to Robotech, and I wanted to just put this out, because I want to spread the word about this, just to fellow Robotech fans who are looking for this and have come from things like that, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and how this new one by SMG compares to the good old Palladium. As you can see here, I own all the Palladium 2nd edition, and ironically, I was never able to play a single session of this game. Everyone I ever tried to play it with hated it so much. Even all the avid Robotech fans, even the person who got me into this, he first picked up the booklet of this one, in the little manga booklet when this was first released. He picked it up because he was all excited for a Robotech RPG game, and he was too young for, at the time, rather he wasn't too young, he was not into Robotech RPG, rather he didn't know it existed, down here in Australia at the back ends of nowhere. Like, just look at these notes. These are notes I've made on how to actually customize the older one, the Palladium one, so that people might want to actually fucking, oh, pardon my language, so that people might actually want to play it. We're Australian, we swear a lot. But, no, even with house rules, I could never get anyone interested to playing this. I had 2 attempts, one of which I came very close, and it just could never get off the ground. And a lot of my players are people online. I currently run 3 games, 1 IRL, which starts soon, and 2 online in Roll20. With this, I know some other GMs who also run these online as well. Now, this is the alternate cover. It's available in 3 covers. You've got the VF1S, you've got the alternate cover, which is this, and then you've got the premium cover, which is red and gold with Veritech outline. It's very cool. I really would have ordered it if my budget didn't allow it, if, you know, the price of shipping and conversion rates here in Australia when I ordered this made it almost 2-1. Made it very expensive for me, but USD, it's a good $60 book. It's hardback, it's very nice. It's going to look great on my shelf next to those other older Robotech books, which are literally just there now because they look pretty. And it has amazing, up-to-date, full-color artwork. And the screen you can see here is the GM screen. I've got it all set up because I use it quite heavily. That's what the standard cover looks like on the front. So that's the normal version. There wasn't actually any price difference that I saw between the alternate cover and this cover. So I just ordered this one because I figured I'll have this one as a GM, I'll have the bad guys, and my players can order the book with the good guys on it. Because my players want to feel special. They want to feel like the good guys. Now, how does this RPG work? So this video is for Robotech fans, obviously, but also for people who just love role-playing games, who are just looking for something new to play. So this is an Advantage D6 system. It uses D6 pools. Good D6 pools. And it's roleplay centric. It's not very heavy on mechanics. So in this review, I'm just going to quick overview of this system. So the system, the book itself, you've got your introduction, your skills and talents, you've got your UEDF, the humans. For older Robotech fans, it's the official name of the RDF now. You've got the Zentradi, which are typically going to be your enemies, but there are rules in here for playing as, running a game where you're all Zentradi. Rules for encounters, so for combat encounters. And then there's a huge section of the scenarios, which is all just lore and ideas for running stuff right out of the show. Now, it's very good if we just talk about, first things first, the build sequence. I've done it many times now, making a character. So essentially how this works, in stark contrast to this, where... Let me show you how you build a character real quick. So, in here, building a character... This is it. This is all your step-by-step instructions about what you do. This book has a fair bit of cross-referencing. That's probably one of the downsides I'd give of this book, is that the amount of cross-referencing, but the amount of cross-referencing that saves on space so that they were able to fit a lot inside this book. It's near 200 pages. It is very nice, and it's got a lot of information in it. And how I'd best describe this system comparatively to other role-playing systems is I'd call it a toolbox system. It's a system where you've got all the tools you need to tell the story you want. If you want to go for something very survivalish and terrifying and have people playing as nobodies who contend with giants, you got level 0 characters, you've got ways of making combat encounters either really fast and easy with swarms of opponents that you can kill like quick. You've got other ways of doing where each opponent is a serious threat that needs to be taken seriously and uses the full stats of the mecha. And other ways of just speeding it up, there's high lethality mode, there's hero points for letting players change the dynamic of the game by including stuff narratively. And again, there's a lot of emphasis on the roleplay. The mechanics is the emphasis on role-playing, and it's very well written in that regard. It's very well written in that the writer, he very much wants you to stay in character, and all these rules are basically designed to help you keep in character. And when you're building your character, it's not so much a min-maxing sort of session. It's more of a building your character to what you want. Build your character in a role-playing method, right? So, this is it. This is the entirety of how you build a character. These 2 pages. And it's pretty simple. It only takes 20 minutes. I'm not joking. It only takes 20 minutes. I've done it numerous times now with many players. And most players I just leave to themselves. I've had players literally whip up characters, new players come and join sessions who have literally whipped them up just 20 minutes before a session starts, or 20 minutes in if they've been late. And it's simple. You compare that to this, where you, firstly, have to go through a whole bunch of stuff before you even reach character creation. And then character creation turns into, you have this mess of, this is all, actual role-playing stuff. The history of your character, all that kind of thing. And, determining your stats like this, because if you determine it the other way, you're basically screwing yourself. And then it goes into these huge mess of options, which is all just mechanical focused, and everyone in this system, from what I've spoken to, and from my experience trying to write for it and trying to convince people to play it, is that basically everyone has to build either the same thing or a different thing, because if you don't, it doesn't work. Here, it's very nice and easy. You have your 6 classes, or careers, rather. You have 6 careers, and you have... Those careers give you a talent, a rank, associated elements, which are, things that go into role-playing and decision-making. If you're in your element, you are, that's what your character's trained in. It's a situation that you're familiar with. So, of course, you get rewarded when you're acting inside your situation. You get nature, and playing to your nature gives you rerolls, rank and fame. Your rank lets you requisition new equipment. Fame is good for entertainers who want to entertain people and use the most of that. There's traditional kinds of levels up. There's lots of ways and lots of different suggestions in this book about how to tweak these rules. For example, there's ways of leveling where they can suggest that additional XP be translated additionally into build points, and how you level up, you hit your level, you get build points, that kind of thing. Now, it's got all that. A very important rule we'll talk about in a bit is stress and drama. It's a huge part of this game. Mental breaks. The mental part, and again, the role-playing part of this game is essential. And you can currently find a heavily redacted version of these rules that's a little out of date compared to the final book on SMG's Strange Machine Games website. They have their sample rules, which is a heavily redacted version, which basically teaches you the basics of how this game works, which is quite simple on a mechanical stand. You have your skills here, as opposed to the skills in this, which, this is out of print. Here are skills, right? They're complicated, they're messy, they're all over the place and highly specialized. Like, it's just a goddamn mess. Here's your page of skills. And each of these can be used for any kind of interaction. They typically separate into physical, technical, social, when they give examples of how they do it. Each one has an associated benefit and cost, which you've got to take in mind. And it's all about player freedom. So, for example, it's player freedom in terms of, how do I put it? When you do a skill test, you pick your 2 skills, and you essentially justify and explain how you're using those 2 skills. So you might you might tell your GM in a combat situation that you're going, when it's your turn to do actions, you're going to take an attack and defend action, and how you're going to do that is you're going to barrel roll towards the enemy while unleashing a punishing barrage that sweeps across multiple enemies. And to do that, you might use something like let's see, you could use something like rapid fire, which has a cost benefit of deluge and an accurate rapid fire to justify your how you're using your machine gun. And then you use something like strafing run, which plays into, it's got a thing of skirmish and movement, which is perfect for that kind of situation where you're strafing along, and those skills, you use that to represent you strafing along. But the skills are written in such a way that it comes down to how you are acting. It's all purely, it doesn't necessitate miniatures. It's not super in the, I can only do this. It's more, I describe what I'm doing, and that's how actions take place. So I get my pool of dice from those 2 skills. Maybe I limit myself to 5 dice. Maybe I go to 6 dice because I have a total of 7 in my pool. But if I take the 6th one, I'm going to gain stress, which means I'm going to get tired real quickly, which can slow me down or cause mental issues. And I'm going to roll them. And then each 5 up is a success, and that's classic my rolling. And, yeah. Typically in the system, 5s are successes, 6s are 2 successes, and there's modifiers to how these can determine, so advantage, edge, hindrance. They essentially can give +1 to rolls, essentially allowing you to make 4s, count as a success, or even make your 6s at disadvantage only count as 1 success instead of 2. 6s counting as 2 successes, and in a combat situation, each success also deals a damage. Now, some very important differences. So that's flat out. And because these skills are completely universal in this way, you can use them for any situation. I could use rapid fire and strafing run in a non-combat situation to hurl a bunch of dizzying insults at someone before swiftly leaving the conversation. Just a flyby, run my mouth to try and help someone out in a social situation. And it would be the same thing. And that's the basics of how tests are done. Of course, the GM might set a difficulty number, typically 1 being easy, 2 being average, 3 being hard, 4 being ludicrous, and 5 being your GM's a jerk. And of course, there's ways to increase your pool limits and so on and so forth. So it's really good in that way, and it counters this where if you didn't have a skill, you were basically screwed. You had to have someone in it that needed to know it. And of course, if you didn't know what to do if you didn't have a skill, these guys were jerks. So you had to figure it out and let your GM figure it out, and they'd have to make up a house rule, because there's no fucking ruling on it. Whereas SMG here, not only have they produced something really nice here, but they've also been really great with clarifying rules in their Discord and on Twitter, as well as errata and FAQ, just to answer some of those more confusing questions about the, some minute details about the system, but it's all relatively straightforward. The artistry is fantastic in this book. But, yeah. And basically, you use all the things to build your character however you want. The career and that, you're building archetypes, like a lot of modern RPGs these days. You pick a pilot as your career. You're not locked into just being a pilot. It just means you've got skills, or rather talents, and an element that's geared towards you being, in behind the wheel of something. Whether that be a Destroid, a car, a motorbike, a Veritech, anything. Right? It's your typical driver. Now, elements are something I should talk about. Elements are really simple. There's ways to get more of them, and they're as simple as you pick your elements, and, this is where your character is most at home. This is the kind of environment that your character's trained in, so obviously doing things in being in these kinds of situations is obviously beneficial to you, as that's going to be what you are, most suited to. So of course your GM might give you benefits and such when you're in your element. And there's certain abilities and mechanics you can only use when you are in your element. Now, the important things to talk about here are drama, fatigue, burnout, mental break. This is a huge part of the system, and in regular mode, it's essential to storytelling. It's a great storytelling device. Fatigue, if you're similar to most RPG systems have something like fatigue these days. It's pretty staple. Your characters get tired, worn down, and this represents both mentally and physically. Burnout is the maximum number of dice you can do, so you unlike other D6 systems I've seen and played, like Wrath and Glory, you're not throwing down a ridiculous number of D6s. You're not throwing down ludicrous amounts of dice. You pretty much... I've done some quick math and build some high-level NPC villains. You're pretty much a god if you're throwing 12 dice. 7 or 8 under most circumstances. 5 most of the time. So, you don't need ludicrous amounts of dice. But drama is the key thing, and something I really enjoyed about this system. As I said, everything encourages the use of role-playing and staying in character. Everything from, selecting your nature and invoking your nature, your personality of your character, to stay in character and give you a buff. The skills are all roleplay-centric. It's not, I want to talk my way out of a situation, or I want to seduce the dragon, I roll a d20. boom, I seduce the dragon. No, here it's, I have to describe why I'm seducing the dragon, how I'm seducing the dragon, and what skills I'm going to do so. And then I might go, alright, well, under this situation, I might have seduced the dragon, because my GM might say difficulty 4, and that's 2, 4, 5 successes. But, of course, they might have said, seduce the dragon with, if I tried to seduce the dragon with, Adept Negotiator and Angelic Grace, sure, I will do that with maybe a hindrance, so these are all being -1, so that'll be, that's no successes, and these are still 2 successes, there's still 4 successes, or they might go, I might choose to try and seduce the dragon with Man-at-Arms and Flash Move, in which case the GM might go, well, you can have disadvantage on that, in which case these are only worth 1, I fail, dragon eats me. It's a classic D&D example, but this is a more curated experience that's more on player freedom to decide how they're going to interact with the world, and it places a lot of emphasis on your player being able to really flex their imagination, and that's really what I love about this system the most. While you, the GM, have all the tools you need to tell an interesting story, they have all the tools as a player to interact in that story in a more, well, a better narrative-driven way. And I love it. This is a good system for telling a story. Now, drama is a way in which you can, give them fatigue that doesn't go away as a permanent sort of, this is now a plot line that you have to contend with. And an example, such as one given here in the book, is a drama might be one of your players pisses off a gunnery chief who loads their Veritex, and the result will be that the gunnery chief sabotages your guns or forgets to load your ammunition before an encounter. So you might have issues with that. And that complication is something you're going to have to resolve that drama before he stops doing that. And that becomes a plot point. And it's a good way to just make your characters always aware and have more effect to their subplots. This is a very much a build around your characters. You can have your epic adventures, but, you've got to focus in on your characters after all, they're the ones playing it. And this lets you set up, drama is a good way of setting up those kinds of encounters. So, skills I've already talked about, skill tests I've already talked about. There's a couple of them, there's a couple of different rules. Heroic moves are almost the equivalent of fate points from, other systems like Dark Heresy, Inspiration, sort of, from D&D. They're an interesting sort of Deus Ex thing, which can be turned off, of course, because everything in this book gives you lots and lots of optional rules. There are so many optional rules in these sections, like the simulation rules and narrative rules. And each of these sections also has alternate rules. So there's just a lovely toolkit to customize and cater your experience to your kind of play. Is really easy. And of course, the game plays really easy. I almost very rarely have to actually consult this book, unless there is a situation where we are questioning a rule or something particularly complex has come up, or we've just flat out forgotten a rule. I very rarely have to use this book, other than to check things, because the system is that easy and simple. You can literally focus on just role-playing and telling the story. Now, talents are also, again, something that's exactly, in a lot of games, talents and feats are, oh, you're a shield master. You can now hit people really hard with a shield, or you get some other really broken OP combo. Thinking of D&D 5e here. Take the alert, so you can never, ever again be surprised, thus ruining all surprise elements of role-playing games ever. Thus ruining elements of story, especially if you happen to be playing, a stealth-focused game where you regularly get surprised or ambushed or, that kind of thing. So now your GM's campaign is ruined. Not the case here. These talents, while they're divided up like this, and do offer, of course, mechanical benefits, once again fall into the department of, and this is why making a character so easy, the mechanical side of building a character with your GM, with your character sheet. is simply in that, and here's the character sheet. This one's for mecha. This one's for just the character. And this is what makes it so easy. Because 90%, of course, it doesn't look like a lot, right? Because it's not. This is why it only takes 20 minutes. Because most of the work is actually building your backstory and writing and developing your character. This is just the mechanical parts of how your character's personality and skills and backstory translates in-game, based on the skills and things you've taken. So that is what I love. That is what most of my players have loved. And it's good because it takes a lot of the number crunching and a lot of min-maxing out of this game. Now, of course, there's ways to min-max. There's ways to min-max in every game. But, of course, that's not the spirit of any role-playing game. And it's very hard to do here, simply because the emphasis is once again on role-playing. And your GM has has a lot of control in this system for when a player tries to min-max to kind of go, no. Because again, they have to justify what they're doing with their skills. And talents, sure, there's some really powerful ones, but most of them are geared, they're not as powerful as you think. Most of them are geared towards enhancing roleplay, giving you bigger element, reducing stress, making you a bit more resilient, and just all in all, better representing the character and his training. And her training. So that's what is primarily what that's like. And that's why building and playing is so easy, and that's what I love. Especially when you compare it to this here, which I love. It's got some great lore, some great snippets, some great inspiration for games. You know, while some of the lore and the Palladium stuff is now outdated, you know, but they still have some great inspiration in those old books, but they were a shit system. They were absolutely trashed. That was just, I think the developer said it best himself. This is just a simulation. This is just a simulation game. It all comes down to numbers and crunch and, you know, exact velocities and speeds of mecha and what their fuel consumption is for miles per hour, that kind of, and how many bullets they fire. And, you know, they only have 3 wounds and whatever light armor they're wearing, and armor of a lower level doesn't block armor of a higher level. It only blocks armor, and the same with pen. So combat's really easy and smooth as a result, even when you're dealing with multiple levels of, you know, who's on foot, who's in a mecha, and who's in a naval ship. It's really easy to deal with. So, in terms of combat, it flows really, really well. Now, a further thing in combat is something that this game does, rather interesting, is finally you've got your game round is not typically going to be like others. Now, we talk about initiative here, and there's options for multiple ways of doing initiative. Something really unique to this game, which I found really, really cool, is that the communication phase is probably the most interesting design choice of this game that I've found, and it's been really interesting for a lot of players, and they've gone, ooh, ah. And that's because in the communication phase, all the players who can communicate with each other in-game go around the table and are allowed to discuss their ideas for a set period of time that the GM sets, based on, you know, how tense the situation is. You might give them a minute, you might give them 2 minutes, you might give them even less time, you might give them 5 minutes. And during that much time, it's basically metagame the game, where they have to discuss. I mean, you should still definitely encourage them to stay in character, but it's the phase in which they discuss what they're going to do, and then at the end of the phase, they go around once. They can only go around once unless one of them has a particular talent, called Fast Planner, to verify and confirm what they're doing. Now, they don't have to stick to what they've said, but that's the thing that's interesting about that. And what that essentially does is it lets the players almost set their own initiative. Because all the combat theirs and your enemies happens simultaneously. So when you do all your dice and you've done it all and everything's resolved, the amount of damage everything does, it comes to the GM at the end of the round to describe what's happened. And it's much more narratively fulfilling because it prevents, and this sort of combat system prevents, again, because it's all happening simultaneously, both the enemy's actions and their actions across a series of phases. It prevents a situation where a single guy walks up, he gets your PC are in the big bad boss fight again at the end of the game. One guy walks up with a Vorpal sword or just a regular sword, rolls a crit smite because he's a paladin OP build, and just destroys the guy, your big bad that you've been spent all this time working on, that you've built everything up for, and kills him in a single strike, and it's super anticlimactic. Here, the power is in the GM's hand to make that situation as epic as it should be, and avoid the situation where they just go, yeah, no, your bad guy's dead, nice try GM, that was anticlimactic, end of day, let's go. So, that is something that's really interesting about this combat system. They sort of set their own initiative. And of course, if you don't like that, you can do it the traditional way, because the main thing about this system is primarily that it's a toolbox system. You almost can... There's lots of different ways to run it according to what style of GM you are, what style of players you've got. If you're running very social heavy, there's definite rules to modify it to lend to that, to make social encounters maybe more fulfilling for your players. Or if you like a rule, or if you like things much more hardcore, you like your anime, but you like your Gundam war anime sort of style, and you want to take the corniness down and the war part of Robotech up a bit, you put on the high lethality mode, and watch you players die to most things on a 1 in 3 chance, or watch them steadily go insane as their total stress value reduces as they have mental breaks, until they have so many mental breaks that their character is just an insane gibbering mess. So, that is the crux of this system. It is a toolbox, and I just wanted to draw attention to this. I've been playing it, it's been a lot of fun, and I am a huge Robotech and Macross fan. A huge fan. This was my introduction to anime before I first saw Fate Stay Night, which changed my life forever. Robotech changed it before that. So this is out now, shipping now. It's available for roughly $60 USD in standard and alternate covers. It has a GM screen, which you can see in this background. It's got most of the information you need. It's just missing 1 or 2 things, which I would have liked to have had on it, but obviously can't fit everything. And if most of the information is here, that 1 or 2 things that you're missing are actually all on one page, so you can just open this up. So, nice and easy in that regard. And to be honest, the charts that I would have liked to seen on this, they're so easy to memorize. They're just the dice pools that mid-level enemies get, and it typically boils down to, really easy. And there's so many ways to run this. Now, I feel like the last thing I should talk about is just the variety of stuff and the game flow. In terms of players in a, let's say, a combat encounter, unlike this, where if they're not all in the same area, if they're not all in the sky in their shadow fighters, or their alpha fighters, or whatever, or if they're not all manning the ship, it's really difficult to run that encounter, and the combat system in this was already a piece of shit. Just saying. Personal opinion, reviewer's opinion, based on all the hours of RPG playing I've gone and done, it's a piece of shit. It's no wonder that no one wanted to play it with me. And the one time I managed to get players, it fell through before we got more than a session in. So, the key thing here is you can actually have someone on the bridge of a ship participating in the same combat in which 2 players are in the air in Veritex or on a destroid on top of the ship, means while your entertainer, who happens to be a VIP on the ship, is dealing with other troubles, such as sabotage or damage that they're caught up with, or, you know, dealing with a civilian mess on this. So it's very easy to run multiple levels in a combat where you can have multiple players doing multiple things. They don't all have to be in the same area. And the best example is actually in the book itself, where nice and easy to have an example of play section, where they give an example of a combat round, where in this example of play, you literally have a Veritech fighter, a bridge officer, and an entertainer all running around doing 3 different things in this combat, and it all contributes to the conflict's resolution, and it, while also, you know, it means they all get to participate equally. And that's a really cool thing. The fact that I don't have to worry about a player sitting there being bored. So long as you're a creative GM, you can go nuts with this system. This system primarily is all about telling a story and your players having that power to interact with that story in really cool and dynamic ways. There's so much. I could go on about this system for hours. I feel like I probably could and should, but at the same time, it's one of those things of, I don't want to dissect this thing too heavily, because we'll be here forever. I don't want to go through rule by rule, dissecting what I do and don't love, because there are some things I don't love. There are also things that make those things that I don't love absolutely obsolete in my mind to the point where I don't care. But an important thing to note is, if you're interested in learning more at the conclusion of this video, if you're a Robotech fan and you've waited, you're unaware of this book's release, and you played this, and now that this is discontinued, you want something new and better and modern, you've got this. It's a good system. Don't let the D6s turn you off. You know, it's not bad. A D20 is all well and good, but this is just a smaller D20. It's very easy. It's very simple. It's very fluid. It plays really well. It's super roleplay centric, and it's got a lot of player and GM freedom. Now, as I was saying, you want more information, go to Strange Machines Games, strangemachinegames.com. You go to the Robotech section. They do have sample rules. Not only that, even if you are not interested in playing this, maybe you're a diehard fan of this for some reason, maybe you just want all things Robotech related, like myself. Maybe you just want all things Robotech and Macross related, like myself. This is an absolutely gorgeous book. It's filled with lots of beautiful art. It's a nice, beautiful hardback. It's very pretty. Everything from the cover to the inserts to the illustrations to just the borders and layout to the characters which are in here, in case, you know, you want to roleplay as your favorite character. They're all your important characters are even in here. Even your not really important characters are in here, which is really cool. All these people are in here. All of that from just looking at the illustrations for the vehicles and equipment is just absolutely breathtaking, especially in color, especially on this nice, lovely paper that this is printed on. It's absolutely a wonder to look at. So, yeah. Like, and even the lore section itself is actually a really good, comprehensive thing. It's got lots of little stories, fiction stories about, for example, things that you don't really get to see a lot of. So, there's this little story here. Forget which one this one was. But it's an international thing. It's interesting in that regard. There's lots of extra tidbits and things. There's this lovely little 2-page scroll out here, which is like the diary of recovered from the journals of Roy Fokker, and it's his thoughts and feelings right up to prior of the SDF-1, crashing in the Pacific Ocean. There's really cool ones. There's this one, which is Exodore talking to a historian who's chronicling the Zentradi side of the war. That's fascinating. There's all sorts of these lovely little lore sections, and the art is beautiful. So even if you're not interested in the game, this is a quality product. Let me tell you that. This is a super, super quality product that is easily worth its $60 USD. And if you're interested in the GM screen, which is also pretty, just flip it over here. Flip the GM screen over there. That's the main one. It's got extra panels on the side which show the cast. This was only about 19. That was definitely worth the investment, especially if you're going to run the game. It also makes just an awesome backdrop. I love it. So yeah, definitely check out this Robotech, the role-playing game, the Macross Saga by SMG Games. Brian Young, Jeff Machinsky. Check out the SMG Discord. They are fantastic. And this is a very quality game and RPG that I'm absolutely loving as a Robotech player, as a Robotech fan, and an avid role-playing game enthusiast, which, takes up most of my life now. Especially since this game come out, because as I said, I was so taken with this that I am running 3 separate games. So, yeah. Definitely check this out if you're a Robotech fan. Definitely worth it. And that is it from me from now, from Jay at Jade Productions. Thank you very much for watching and listening.